Hello everyone, Krish here. How you guys doing? I hope everything is okay and you worked on the previous tutorials and you are ready to move on. Okay, so today is a kind of a turning point video. Why is that? Because so far we learned all the background works. We know how to create a service, we know how to extend actuate endpoint, and also we know how to talk to database and how to read and write to database. So everything is ready. So today we are really jump into the pool and see whether we can make it. Okay, so I got few feedbacks and saying sometime you couldn't follow it and your project didn't work. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the project what we did so far into my GitHub repository, right? So there will be a new repository for the GitHub. I'll put this link below here, below this video. So go to that repository and I suggest you fork that and then you get the first project, like a demo project what we did, and get it work. So what we are going to do today? So not only today, from today onwards we are going to implement real enterprise application. So that is the old feedback I got. Hey, go ahead and let's do something real world example rather than just writing a student and employee to the database. Let's do something real world example. Okay, I'm ready. Let's do that. So how we are going to make it? Because I'm here, so you are there, and how we going to connect? This is how we are going to do. So I'm going to create a GitHub repository, which I already explained and link is in below, right? So you need to fork to that repository. Then whenever I do some samples, whenever I release the video, I will push the raw files and all the samples and all the necessary things you need to work on that particular video, right? So then you can clone it and you can pull it and you can work on, you can do your project. Same time, if something goes wrong, you will be ready by referring to my project. And also, since I'm continuously going to upload, you may need to follow you need to do all these examples as soon as I release the video, because otherwise you will pile up all those examples and end of the day you won't do anything. So point number 2, don't go to the traps. The traps mean whenever you watch video, you will feel, okay, this is really simple, right? So I don't have to do it. I can do it with the next video, right? So the next video you feel the same. End of the day, you won't do any examples, right? So keep in mind, this thing will digest to you, this thing will come to your hand as long as you do these examples and do something more than I'm going to teach you. So that's a rule number 2. The third one, you need to connect. Most of the time you guys using my Facebook account to talk to me. That is not a very successful way to do it, because number one, since you are not in my friend list, the Facebook messages will not appear in my inbox. So it takes time to me to find it, and that time maybe things already passed. So what you can do is just reach me in a Twitter. So that is the easiest way to reach me, and if you have any problem, just send me in a tweet. So then I can look into that and I can help you guys to move on. Okay. So what is the course agenda? What we are going to build? Before that, if you're not subscribed to channel, just go ahead and subscribe now. Don't postpone it, subscribe now, and also switch on the notification. The reason is I'm going to frequently upload, so you should not miss any videos on this course. Okay, right. So what we are going to build? So we are going to build a rent a car application. Right, you may already know this. Rent a car is the common business. If you need a car, you can go to the rent a car company and you can get a car. So there are multiple modules involved here. You need to search, and we need to maintain the vehicles, and we need to maintain the stakeholders and also accounts, right? So there are real good enough business domain covered by this topic, rent a car application. So we are going to build that application with multiple services. Right, when when multiple services involve, that comes service discovery and also load balancing, and we need to secure our services. Right, everyone should not access all the services. We need to put some security roles, and we need to secure our service. And also we need some resilience implemented, like for example circuit breaker pattern. If particular service is not working or something happened to the service, then your system need to resilience, right? You need to know how to sustain under this situation. So we need to implement something like a circuit breaker pattern, and we are going to do that too. Also, we need to deal with a lot of configuration. Let's say you have a 10 services, you need to make sure across those 10 services you maintain consistent configurations, right? So we need to externalize the configuration, and we are going to talk about that today itself. Externalize the configurations and connect all those services to that configuration server. And finally, we are going to create a Docker or any other container from our service and create a cluster, right? We may require to run more than one instance from a particular service. For example, in a particular our domain, let's say in a summer, people maybe they have a huge demand for vehicles, right? So in that case, search service may need to replicate, right? So in our past theories, we discussed. So whole point of microservices, without clustering or without like replicating entire giant application, we should be able to replicate individual services, right? So individually scalable, individually deployable, right? So those are theories. Hope you remember. So we are going to create a clusters or Docker cluster or something like that, and to create a multiple instances from the same service and see how our discovery pattern, discovery tools works. And also mainly we need to talk about distributed tracing. Why it is important? Because let's say A service call to B, B equal to C, C equal to D, right? So somewhere something isn't working. So we need to figure out where the exact problem is. For that, we need distributed tracing. And also, end of the day, we are going to deploy to the AWS or any other cloud you guys proposing, and we are going to complete our service, right? So still it's ongoing. You can add parts, right? You can ask me, hey, can you cover this as well, right? So send me a message, send me add a comment, or send me a tweet, and I can customize it, right? So still the course is preparing and it's still in progress. So I'm flexible to customize it. Okay, ready? Then again, go ahead and subscribe. And also one more request, if you like this video, press thumbs up, and because then I know you like this video, and I know you are following this video, so it's really encouragement for me. And also, if you have an audience, if you're a friend, and if you have an audience where you think it's interesting, feel free to share this video on your social media as well. Okay, so then enough talking, back to work. Okay, so in our journey, first thing we are going to talk about configuration, how we can externalize configurations, right? So this topic has two parts. One, how to externalize configuration with your local file system, and second, how you can externalize configuration to GitHub or any other external, hosted configuration, mainly with the GitHub, right? So why we need separate configuration server? There are multiple reasons for that, right? So there we detail discussed in the theory videos, but let me to recap it. So we need to separate our configuration from our code base. It's simple, right? So we don't want to clutter our code with some database URL, some other domain related data or business data, right? So therefore we need to externalize. Then maybe when you really work on enterprise system, maybe you have 100 to 1,000 services running, 1,000 instances are running, right? Maybe you have 10 services out of to altogether maybe 1,000, 10,000 instances running on your cluster, right? So you need to make sure each services has same consistent configurations, right? So that's point number 2. Point number 3, you should be able to change some configuration, change some parameters on the fly while the service is running. For example, log level, right? So let's say particular service is struggling, so you need to put the log level into the debug or info level and see what's going on with that service, right? So for that, with the externalized configuration, you can do that without restarting your services. And also, let's say end of the day, we create a Docker from the service, right? So because the microservice, if you want to get the real benefit of microservice, you may need to run each service on each separate host, right? So one service per host, that's the theory we discussed, right? So we can use multiple servers. What we can do is we can create a Docker from each service, right? So in that case, same Docker you should be able to deploy in your QA environment, dev environment, and finally the prod environment, right? So once you create the Docker, that Docker should go everywhere. That's the whole point of creating a container, right? So that is the way you can make sure your file code base is consistent on each platform, each environment, right? So for that, you can use the same Docker But obviously the database URL and all, password, username, all those configurations are different from environment to environment. So what you can do is you may have your service Docker and your Docker is pointed to some particular configuration server, right? So based on the profile you are running, if you run on a dev server, it will pull dev configurations, right? If you can take the same Docker and put into that QA server environment, that will pull the QA configuration, and the same Docker you can pull into the prod, that will pull the prod configurations, right? So there are multiple other reasons as well, but mainly because of these reasons we need to externalize our configurations, right? How we can do that? There are multiple ways to do it with Spring Cloud, right? So first way is maintain your configuration locally, right? Still it's a separate server, but that configuration server itself keep the configuration in the local file system, right? So second way, the configuration server is running, but that configuration server pulls the configuration from a GitHub or any other repository, right? So there are few advantages and disadvantages doing those, right? So number one, if you maintain a local configuration server, still is the same way it works, right? Though it is externalized, it is independent from other services, right? Service will pull the configuration, but configuration itself in a file system. So you may not have a auditability, right? Who changed what, right? What was the previous configuration, right? So let's say suddenly you change the configuration, service start to break, right? So you have to roll it back. There is no direct rollback because you are maintaining a file system, right? But if you host these things on a GitHub, right? Git itself has a commit log, right? So let's say you did some configuration change and something is broken, and then you can go back and revert to the previous commit and things will work again, right? So we have advantages like that when you're hosting on the Git. So I'm going to cover both, but since we talked a lot today, I'm going to only cover the local file system based configuration today, and with the next video, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'm going to show you how to move these things to the GitHub and create a Git repository, and how we can get all those profile based benefits with that. So let's jump into here. And for this, I'm going to create a new project, right? So I'm not going to use the previous project. So I'm going to create a new project. So I'm not going to explain these things because you're already familiar with this. So I'm going to create my package name. Okay. So I have a group com.krishantha.trendcloud, and artifact is config local. I name like that because we are going to the next example would be Git, and then everything is remain same, and that's it I'm going to use, right? So for here I'm going to add my usual actuator endpoint as well as config server. Right, so these are the dependencies I'm going to add. Okay, so now I have my service, and here I have my POM file, right? So here you can see, right? So it created a config server dependency as well as test is you can ignore for now, right? And the actuator dependency, right? So we are using 2.1.2 release, which is the latest release, right? We used last time as well. Okay, so and if you go here, this is the default file you get with this. So we need to add a one more annotation, enable config server. That's it. Now we are ready to run configurations. That is that much simple. So that's what I was explaining, how Netflix and the Spring Cloud help to do things, right? So we just simply created a configuration server by adding a single one annotation. Okay. So usually my services run on port 8080, right? So I'm going to change this port, right? Again, I'm going to use a YAML here, but if you friend with the properties file, feel free to go with it, but I'm not. I mean, I'm not hate either properties or YAML, but I prefer to go with the YAML, right? So I'm going to give a default port, right? So port is I'm going to give as 8191 because I want to use 8080 for other services, right? So I'm going to give this port, and that means the config server, my config server will run on port 8191, right? So now we need to see, we need to store the configurations, right? So here's the concept. You need to understand this very carefully. This is configuration server. What it's supposed to do is give the configuration data through HTTP. That is the server's responsibility. So now whether it's a local or remote is just a store where you store the configurations, right? So as I explained this video, I'm going to explain how you can store the configurations locally. But the moment you want to host it, configuration service will remain same, but your configuration store will go to GitHub, right? So here, if you go to GitHub, just one more property we need to add, saying, hey, your configuration store is in GitHub now, right? So that's something you should understand very carefully. Depend on the local or the GitHub, configuration services remain same. It's nothing different other than adding one more property. But what change is where you store the configuration. So in a Spring Boot, there are few places which is looking for a configuration files when it is startup. You can change it, right? You can override and you can give your own path. But by default, it change on a class path or resource directory or resource config directory or in the current directory or current directory slash config. So all those 4 places it checked for configuration. So if you use something else like ABC directory, you need to tell that, hey, my configuration is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a default directory which is a config, right? So there I'm going to create few configuration files. Service1.yml. Likewise, I'm going to create other file. Right. So I have a service1.yml and service2.yml. So here I'm going to add the property. Right. So I add hello from service 1 and I'm going to do that same thing for a 2 saying hello from service 2, right. So I'm ready. So now I have a configuration service running, configuration service created, same time I configured configuration store. So now in a property file I need to tell use the native profile, right. So spring dot active profile is native, right. So that tells my configurations are stored locally, right. So that simply it means, okay. So what I am going to do is now I am going to run this service. Okay. So my service is running, so I am jumping into my REST client. So I am going to do here HTTP localhost, right. So port 8191, so that is the port I used, and service 1, right, slash default. So that's my profile, right. So now it tells me, hey, this is my configuration service 1 and this is my where the file comes from, where the file source, and this is the properties, right. So available. If you add more properties, you can get it, right. So if you put service 2 here, right, so you will see it changed to service 2 and the name is service 2. So if you put service 3 here, right, so you don't have anything, right, because we don't have a service 3 configuration. So also if you put the service 2 and some other profile here, let's say prod, right, it gives the same value, right. So if you say dev, it gives the same value, right. So there is a naming convention you need to follow with the property file, especially when you are hosting in the JIT, right. So you have to give the service name hyphen your profile hyphen if you have a label and then YAML or properties, right. So I think you got a very basic understanding how you can create configuration server and how you can host it, right. So now you can host, you can create any number of configurations here, right. So if you say, let's say I need something like service.id, right, something like this, and this also has the same thing, but different IDs, right? So I'm going to run this service again. So go back to my REST client and call it. So now it gives me other properties as well, right? And small mistake here, I'm going to, right? So now I'm going to restart. So when I execute this, now I'm getting other properties as well, right? Service.greeting and service.id. So if I fetch for one, so it will give me the same thing, right? So I hope you're clear, right, how to host and how to get a configuration server. Just play with this, right? So I'm going to push this as well to my Git repository. Again, go to my GitHub repository, which I'm going to add the link below in the description section, and make sure you fork it. So and then you will get notification whenever I push something, and also then you can pull it and you can get my files and you can compare with your ones. Okay, so then go ahead and subscribe if you're not yet, and also make sure if you have an audience for this type of videos, just please feel to share it. And also if you like this video, just give a thumbs up. Then I'll see you in the next video very soon, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Till that, stay safe, take care.